Good evening, everybody. I'm Jason Liasatis. This is my show, Outside the Box. Very excited and enthusiastic this evening to have a returning guest on the show. I've been looking at Paul's work for a long time. I haven't got his book here to hand. His book's amazing book, Dispelling Wetiko. I forgot what it was, something about the madness within or something, Paul. Amazing. Paul's www.awakeninthedream.com. Paul's work is wonderful. Awakening the Dream Community, Paul's the founder of. I've loved Paul's work for many, 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 many years because Paul talks a lot about sort of dispelling that Wetiko virus and that madness within ourselves. And listen, Paul, thanks so much for coming on the show tonight. Thank you for all the work you've done over the years. And as I said to you just now, it's the perfect timing to be on the planet, right?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy to be here, Jason. Thank you so much. I'm just excited to share my work.
Wonderful. And just a quick apology to everybody this evening. My studios had to close up the road, which was doubling as my art gallery. I'm an artist, because of obviously the virus, the Wetiko virus, and I've had to redo my studio here where I live, so that's fine. But it's all the lighting isn't as right as usual, and the sound. Apologies if the sound isn't great. Okay, so you know, I'll just open with a little bit of a rant. I haven't prepared much at all, really, but my goodness, here we are on the planet. We were going along a trajectory, really fear and madness. I call it a global casino mental asylum, Paul. That has become normal. I've been talking about this in my book, The Emergency Transformation, 8 years ago. The timing wasn't quite right for that book. The timing is right for all our books now. And the amazing thing is for me now is we were going along and we really did need a smelling salts, a real heavy smelling salts, and this is a huge, huge awakening for humanity now. Now, before I unleash Paul on you, I love speaking to you, Paul. I saw your show with Alan Stansfield. I love Alan. Hello, Alan. If you're seeing this, I've looked at your work many, many years ago. Fantastic pioneer in this kind of work. And you know, I say this. This is what I will say, just to frame the show. Now, I don't want to talk about too much about the heaviness and the cabal and the psychopaths that are sort of you know, ruining humanity and stealing humanity's ship. We're stealing humanity's ship, really, truth be known, as we'll discuss with Paul. I think we're at a great impasse now. We've all been pushed home towards our families, which is wonderful, really, because we've been dislocated from ourselves, dislocated from our families, dislocated from nature, dislocated from self. We're pretty spiritually homeless as a species, and it's become normal. This virus now is the most amazing thing, because my worry, Paul, and we'll get you going on this. My worry is this: it's bringing us all home to ourselves in a strange way. Actually, home, because people are being kept at home. What worries me the most is, can we awaken and transform and come home to ourselves, into our power and awakening quick enough before it resets and carries on as normal? Because that's a Frankenstein's monster that's been killing us for many years, and it's predicated on fear, the money system, which is paralytic to consciousness and development and human blossoming. Very worrying, and it's kept us all doing things we don't really want to do. This could be a utopia on the planet. The money system's mad, and what this thing is doing, sorry to keep going, but just to base camp this, what this thing is doing, this virus, is, for me, it's exposing the absurdity of money, the monopoly system game we're playing, and the fact that we've been so dislocated and dismembered from ourselves. So for me, it's like a spiritual renaissance. It's a huge awakening, a huge homecoming. We're being forced to see ourselves, and we're being forced to see the world for what it is. And that's what I'll just start by saying. And I'm sorry I ranted a bit before letting you speak, Paul. So thanks for your great work, Paul. You're here on the planet exactly at the right time now. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. So, yeah, and I mean, my God, what a surreal time we live in. It's more and more, like I point out in a recent article, it's getting easier to recognize the dreamlike nature. And what I mean by the dreamlike nature is that this isn't sort of in a metaphorical way like a dream. This is a collective dream that we're all dreaming up together. And that's really the perspective that I come from. And if you aren't familiar with that perspective, then you're not really going to understand what I'm pointing at. But so if we could just take a step back. So here we're in the middle of this global pandemic of the coronavirus. And I'm in the middle of an article where I'm pointing out that the coronavirus is a lower level reflection or emanation of this virus that I've been writing about for decades, a higher dimensional virus of the mind, the Wetiko virus. That's a Native American term. I wrote a book about it, Dispelling Wetiko.
Brilliant book.
And thank you. And that virus, that mind virus, Wetiko, it has the seemingly, magical power of extending itself into the world. So it's a psychospiritual disease in the human soul, in the collective unconscious, deep within the psyche, that has this magical ability to extend itself out into the world and seemingly configure events in the outer world so as to synchronistically reflect the state of the psyche that's under its thrall. Now that's really interesting. If we could just pause on that for a moment, because that's basically saying that the outer circumstance of our lives is actually reflecting what's going on inside of our psyches. And that, by the way, that's a description of a dream. Because what is a dream? If you're in a dream at night, the dreamscape is actually an expression or a reflection of the very process that's going on inside of your psyche, that the outer is reflecting the inner. And so what I'm saying is that the Wetiko virus has that same capability of actually being an inner disease of the soul, of actually expressing itself through the outer world. So what I'm basically saying is that the coronavirus is actually an externalization of the inner Wetiko virus, which, think about it. So I've been writing about Wetiko for decades. It's an invisible virus that evokes fear and feeds off of the fear that it constellates in us, and it's contagious. And wow, that's a description of the coronavirus. And so what I'm, just to make the next point, is that the Wetiko virus, which is a virus of the mind, which works through the projective tendencies of our mind in such a way that we then unwittingly become instruments to act it out. And at the same time, it does it in a way that hides itself from being seen. So we don't even know we're taken over. So it operates through the blind spots in our psyche. And, so in such a way that we hypnotize ourselves, we entrance ourselves. And because we don't see it, that's how it gains its power. Is as soon as we begin to see the Wetiko mind virus, how it operates in the world and how it operates within our own minds through the way we react, all of a sudden, once we shed light on it and see it, we take away its power. But it's been just wreaking havoc on humanity for millennia because we haven't seen it. We've been blind to it. Well, here comes the coronavirus. And the coronavirus, like I'm saying, is the materialization in incarnate form of the Wetiko virus. And from the dreaming point of view, when an unconscious content is ready to be integrated, it always becomes dreamed up. It becomes objectified so that we can see it. And seeing it is one step, and then recognizing, oh, that's actually reflecting something in me. Then you can own that part of me. That's really the dreaming process. That's the process of individuation, of how we become whole and wake up. So basically, there's incredible gifts encoded in the outbreak of the coronavirus. And I can just go on forever about this, but basically one, like what you would say, Jason, was right on, that it's actually, revealing to us that we're interdependent, that we depend on each other for our very survival. And, so in one way you could talk about this as being like this holographic awareness. And I call it holographic because think about it, any little fragment of a hologram contains encoded within it the whole hologram. And so, for example, we have these, we're doing these restrictions on, like with Tehran, for example, with Iran. And, and it's, these sanctions that we have on that country. And it's just pointed out by the UN, I think even today or something, that, oh yeah, that's really impeding their ability to deal with, they have a big outbreak of the coronavirus. Well, guess what? By us impeding their ability to deal with the corona outbreak in their country, it's hurting us, because then there are going to be more people infected. And, that's what I mean about it's a holographic, having holographic awareness, that we're not separate, that any part of the hologram encodes and is connected with and not separate from the whole. So this virus, this coronavirus, is actually forcing us to see through the illusion of the separate self, what Einstein calls the optical delusion of consciousness, that we exist separate from each other. And he actually says this needs to be the greatest task of humanity. And so this is where it's potentially a wake-up call. And one way of understanding, stepping out of the separate self, because, we're all in this together, it sounds great, the words, but here's a really beautiful image to understand it. Say if you're looking in this river and there's this whirlpool, or there are two whirlpools, and they look separate. Oh, there's one, and then over there 10 feet away is the other. But when you actually inquire into what are they composed of, you begin to realize, wait a second, the whirlpool itself is just an appearance of the whirlpool, which seems separate, but it's actually composed of the same water in the river that the other whirlpool is composed of. So when you get right down to it, you can't distinguish the two whirlpools. They're not actually separable at all, even though they appear to be separate. That, I think, is a really good image of understanding, of seeing through the illusion of the separate self. And seeing through that illusion of the separate self, that involves an expansion of consciousness, an opening of the heart, and compassion, just in a natural way, just arises when we have that realization. And one other way of describing this is saying, yeah, we're having a collective dream. And when you actually, begin to recognize that this is the dream, and just like in your night dream, you can have lucidity and have a lucid dream, I'm talking about the same thing right now. And when you realize that, you realize, oh, we're actually dream characters in each other's dreams. What that means, say you have a dream last night and you wake up and there are all these people. Well, you contemplate those people in the dream being dream characters. They're embodied reflective aspects of parts of yourself. They're actually not separate. They were in your dream. They're parts of your own psyche. And same thing right now. So us being dream characters, that helps to see through that illusion of the separate self. And then we begin to discover, wait, if we're like actually having a collective dream, then yeah, we have a hand in the creation of it. This dream, this is the revelation of quantum physics, that the act of observation is creative, that this universe is a malleable universe, and that it's not separate from our consciousness in a mysterious way. But here's when I say that the coronavirus has an incredible gift. It can show us the dreamlike nature. It can help us to see through the illusion of separateness. It can unlock the most incredible creativity. Like I was realizing, it's showing us, wait, if this is a dream, we're actually co-dreaming the dream. We actually have this unimaginable creative power that has been turned against us because we've been unconscious. That's Watiko. And so the coronavirus is revealing to us Watiko. And here's, for example, what I mean. Here's how Watiko operates in the psyche. It actually, if we're holding a viewpoint, being that this is dreamlike. So just imagine if we're in a night dream, and if you hold a perspective in the night dream, well, what's going to happen? That perspective is the night dream is going to shapeshift and instantaneously reflect that perspective. Because what is the night dream but your own mind just reflecting back to you, whatever perspective you're holding. But then as soon as that happens, now we have evidence confirming to ourselves the accuracy or the objective. It's objectively, true what we're seeing, or at least that's what we imagine, because now we have the proof, because the dream is reflected back our viewpoint. So then we become even more fixed in that viewpoint. And the more fixed in that viewpoint we become, the more the dream will just reflect back that viewpoint, offering us all the evidence of the objectivity of what we're seeing. And then we become entranced, thinking what we're seeing is outside of ourselves, that it's objective. So then we react to it and become conditioned by it, not recognizing it's just our own mind, our own energy. And then guess what? We've entranced ourselves. We've hypnotized ourselves. We've wielded our incredible creative power in a way that's imprisoned us. That's what each of us are doing, to the extent that we haven't woken up and haven't seen Watiko. And when you get 7.5 billion of us in that sort of fallen state together, and of course not everyone is, but a lot of people are, then you get a world being like a dream. The world just gets dreamed up to reflect back what we're doing, And if we don't recognize it's an oracle, it's a revelation that's speaking symbolically, then like a recurring dream, if we don't get woken up by whatever the wake-up call is now, for example, the coronavirus, well, then just like a dream, the next night it'll be more amplified and more intense until we finally get the message. So what I'm basically saying is that, hey, look, when you recognize this is a dream and you recognize the coronavirus, it's a revelation. It's showing us something. And the real gift is like that it's showing us the inner workings of the Wetiko virus that has been killing us. Because if the coronavirus got healed right now, I mean, that would be great in one way. But, if we just return to normal, which there is going to be no return to normal, to business as usual, to the good old days, and it's so easy just to fall asleep and imagine just like a game of make-believe and pretend everything's okay. No, before the coronavirus emerged, we were enacting collective suicide. We were destroying the biosphere, the life support system of the planet. So it's important to really to view, this is why with Jung himself was fighting his whole life to implement symbolic awareness. Symbols are the language of dreams. So this is what he was after, was to recognize the universe is a dream, is an oracle, is a revelation that's actually speaking symbolically. And like a dream is a compensation. When we get one-sided, a dream compensates. And through symbols, through the dream, it reflects back exactly what we need to wake up to. And we only get the blessing if we actually are able to decode, to decipher what's hidden within the actual manifestation. And so what I'm basically saying is that there's an incredible opportunity that's available to us if we don't get hooked by the fear. Because the coronavirus has two vectors, or there's more than two, but two main vectors of transmission. One is physical, the respiratory, the lungs. The other is mental, is in our mind. And of course, it's a fearful thing, but if we get caught by the fear, so it's natural to feel afraid, but we don't want to identify with that. If we don't get caught by the fear, then all of a sudden it's way easier to recognize the dreamlike nature because things have just become so surreal.
I shouldn't laugh, but in a crisis, man, but Paul, thanks so much. It's just a joy to speak to you. You're the perfect guest right now because I've been sort of transitioning from talking about the darker stuff and the reality, if you like, of the system that's driving us nuts and making a bridge between that, like say Eckhart Tolle's work and other people's work who don't talk about the inner work that we must do, like you're helping people with your shamanic work or your psychotherapy work or whatever. Oh, my pen couldn't keep up there, so I'll have a quick rant. Is that all right, Paul? Just 1 second.
Yeah, for sure.
Man,
yeah.
It's funny to be so excited in such a crisis, but I made a lot of notes about the dream. Well, it's a dream and it's also a nightmare, I would say, that's become normal. But I want to just go through a few things here just to get it off my chest. I've listened to the politicians, saying we will get through. They always go like this: we will get through this, And I'm not here to bash the politicians. They're just victims of a system of Wetiko, basically. We will get through this and return to normal. Look, the psychopaths, and by the way, I don't want to bring this up because it's not you now. I know that you've left that kind of thing. You're doing different work, but you did write a book called The Madness of George Bush. At a very poignant time, Paul, because you talked about repercussions just now and feedback loops and consequences of decisions made without wisdom and vision, right? Mm-hmm. And that is Iraq, Iran, like you said, the Syria refugees, blah, 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 all consequences of a nightmare scenario made without decision. So I also wanted to say that, as I said in the beginning, because it is important, that power and profit is generally put before humans' happiness and freedom, generally. So when they're talking about, let's get through this and return to normal, you're like Paul said, it'll never be normal again. And who wants it to be normal? My concern is, guess what? By the time people are running out of food soon, and when they're really desperate, someone comes along and says, hey, do you want your old job back that you hate when you don't see your family and your kids growing up anymore? Yes, please. Yes, please. So we're in a transitional spiritual place now of, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'd agree, Paul, recovery, actually a recovery, like a spiritual recovery.
Yeah, can I say something about that?
Sure, Paul, yeah, man.
For sure. So, because I just written this big article, it actually started as like just an idea that was going to be one page, then it turned into a major chapter in my next book, and it's about that we're all shamans in training, and because the shaman is the wounded healer, and we've all been wounded. There's collective PTSD, and it depends how you hold your wound. You know, whether you actually activate the shamanic energies to come through you in a productive way. And the idea being, instead of just avoiding our wound or trying to go around it or compartmentalizing it, by actually going through it's an initiation, and it connects you with your deeper gifts, and that's the archetype of the shaman. But what I was inquiring into about the archetype of the shaman, or the figure of the shaman that's in all of our psyches and in all of us, and it's a figure just in the non-local field, is that as a shaman typically takes on the illness of the person they're working with, and they literally take it on, which interestingly has a double meaning of confronting it, but taking it within themselves, and then they become ill themselves. They fall ill. They're so empathic that they literally experience the illness of their client from the inside, and they become ill themselves. But then somehow, because of their connectedness with the self, with the the wholeness of the self, they're able to bring themselves back to health. And doing that, in a non-local energetic way, helps to heal, or at least makes it more probable the client will be able to connect with their wholeness, because they're ultimately not separate. Now, why that's so interesting to me, that maps on to the collective body politic, that we as would-be shamans have taken on the illness, the sickness, the madness in the world, in the greater body politic of our species, and we have all been sickened. And yet, if we're able to hold that in a way and cultivate that into creativity and connect back to our higher self, which is always transcendent to and untouched by that sickness, then we're actually able to really step into our bodhisattvic identities of being able to be of help. And so the idea being, I mentioned being creative, because the figure of the artist is really the figure, that's where completely a shaman is a storyteller, wounded healer, artist. And an artist is a creative person who turns, if you think about it, there's so much incredible energy available in the world right now. It's kind of like, during the Super Bowl, first, because I'm a sports fan, just knowing that as the Super Bowl is happening, like however many hundreds of millions of people are watching the same event, there is some energy that's available. Well, just imagine now the entire global community is all having a shared collective experience. There's incredible collective energy that's available. And there's like stress and anxiety and fear and uncertainty and all of that. But there's a way of holding it. And of course, that's not separate from us. It touches us. It activates us in certain ways. But if we're able to tap into that energy and channel it creatively, that's the medicine. That's the medicine both for ourselves as an individual and for our species collectively. And so, like for me, I've noticed since this pandemic has started, I've been writing like mad. And I realized, oh my God, it's like I'm so happy that I'm doing that instead of feeling like, stuck, or that I'm acting out or compartmentalizing, or just zoning out and watching TV or something. No, I'm just like, I just cannot believe how many articles that I'm writing in my head and on the computer at the same time. And so I just want to say that, and it's not like people have to write. Any medium, even the way you wash dishes, can be creative. The idea being that, what's happening now, there's an energy that's available that if we don't, in essence, if we don't get caught by the fear of it, then there's something available to us that can help us to awaken in the dream. That's basically what I'm saying.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Thank you so much, Paul. Lovely, lovely. I'm so glad we're speaking tonight. And as I'm studying, I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely. I'm waking up in the middle of the night so many times to write stuff. It's like, oh, I'm sick of this, man. Where's my pen? Where's my paper? And it's all I'm writing is what I wrote in my book, and obviously new material. But I've never had so many people contact me in these times, Paul, of Great Awakening. And I just want to just chuck my bit in here now. What Paul's talking about, in my opinion, is he's talking about the birth of a new society. And In my own work, I talk about, because I'm Greek, I talk about the word epoche, epoch, which comes from the Greek word epoche, which actually means, if you look at that word, because epoche, you think epoch is a whole new thing. It is. But actually the word epoche means in Greek stoppage, right? Stoppage. And what in my opinion is what we're talking about now, and the coronavirus. In any pregnancy, there's a place where the pregnancy stops, and then a transition and the birth begins. There's that point. And I am absolutely convinced in my whole life that this is where we are now. Stoppage, birth. Now, can we collectively as humanity, with that smelling salts enough, and transcend our fear, which is Paul, because births are very frightening things. I've been at one, yeah, and I've been at quite a couple of deaths, both. And I'll transition into that death thing now. Just one quick second, Paul. But births are frightening, but we've got to have the courage to know that we're birthing whole new humanity into being. And I know I'm keeping saying this, Paul, but not get sucked back into the fear, because like David Icke talks about years ago, Paul, problem, reaction, solution. This is the perfect thing now. Problem, reaction, help us. Mass vaccination, microchipping, cashless. It's all already happening here. And I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. It's like, it'll be better if you microchip. Please help us. Please help us. Tell us what to do. So, and just a quick thing, Paul, before you come back in, about dying. I was with my father when he went, on a very positive note here, Paul. I was with my father when he died, and other people. When my father died, he said, everything's so beautiful. I mean, my father saw beauty anyway. He saw the leaves on the trees. He taught me very well. And that's why I look at things as an artist now in awe. So this is, as I said, transition into my new shows where I'm going to talk about the therapeutic side of things and coming home to ourselves. But sometimes in that death, which is what everyone's going through now, a death of the old, a death of what used to be, that death is a portal into something new. If we can hold our center, we can come home to ourselves, because don't forget, Paul, and everybody that's listening, most people are so fast going to doing what they got to do. We've left ourselves behind. It's like, so what we're doing now is we're catching up with ourselves, and that will be a shock for a lot of people. That's why I'm going to do my new shows and my art groups as well, because people are going to be thinking, oh, I don't know who I am anymore. And this is where people like Paul Levy come in.
Yeah, so I want to, that's totally right on, Jason, because the shamanic trip is a death rebirth. And that's what we're in. We're in that transition between the two. And I just want to bring up, so here's the coronavirus, which is the lower level reflection of the Watiko virus, which is a higher dimensional mind virus that exists in the collective unconscious. Now, keep in mind, if we see somebody, whatever, a political leader, for example, who we concretize as, oh, they have Watiko or whatever, well, then that perspective, we're as much under the thrall of the bug as we're imagining they are, because it feeds off of polarization, not just fear. And the idea being is that if we see whatever political person or whoever, as, oh, they're taken over by Watiko, they're evil, they're, from the dreaming point of view, they're just reflecting that they're a dream figure. They're reflecting that part of ourselves. Now, so Watiko is that's the malady that our species is suffering from. Like if coronavirus got healed right now, we would still be, completely unawake to the Watiko virus, which would kill us. So the idea being the coronavirus is actually shedding light on the Watiko virus, but then what is the medicine? And I point out my latest work in the last few years, I wrote a book on quantum physics, and I'm pointing out, now quantum physics has been out in the world for, a little bit over 100 years. And I'm pointing out that quantum physics itself is a revelation that is the medicine for Watiko. And here's how, if I can just explain, because Watiko, if you think back, I was describing it like we then, because we're not aware of the incredible, immense creative power that we have, we then become entranced by the projective tendencies of our mind in such a way that we think the world is objective and separate. And if the world is objective, then we become subject to it, and we become a subject, which is an actual ego, which is the separate self. But the idea being here, quantum physics is coming along and saying, hey, there actually isn't an objective universe. If you think there's an objective universe, you're wrong. That's a nonsensical idea. That's an antiquated idea. We've empirically proven beyond the slightest shadow of a doubt, there is no such thing, i.e. the act of observation literally evokes the universe that we're observing. And it's one quantum system with no separable parts. What that means is that the act of observation is creative, that we have this incredible creative power, to create moment by moment our experience of ourselves and our experience of the world. And to the extent that we don't see that, like I was saying, then we entrance ourselves, hypnotize ourselves, and that is a description of Wetiko. Now, the idea being, once you see through the objective, the illusion of that there being an objective world separate from you, and you recognize, oh, there is no objective world, well, then wait a second. What happened to the subject? Us as a subject needs an object to be in relationship to be a subject. When all of a sudden there's no object, who's the subject becomes the question. And all of a sudden, that's where quantum physics has promoted itself to become a spiritual path, because it's actually shedding light on who we are. And it's dispelling the Wetiko virus, because it's a revelation. In Tibetan Buddhism, they'll have these things called terma, the hidden treasures. And, I've written about it. I won't go into the whole thing. But the idea being that there are these like enlightening treasures, teachings or objects that have the power of waking us up, that are encoded and hidden in the fabric of the universe in all different dimensions. And exactly at the right time, when they're needed to be discovered, the person who's destined to discover that particular hidden treasure or terma will discover it. And it's like a dream symbol. It's a compensation. It's the medicine. It's like a vitamin bringing back into balance the one-sidedness of the community. Well, I'm pointing out that quantum physics, we have literally dreamed up quantum physics into our world and into our minds as a modern-day analog of terma. It's actual hidden treasure. It's showing us the dreamlike nature, because quantum physics has proven that this universe is a dream. That's, by the way, one of the revelations of quantum physics. And when you recognize the dreamlike nature, you see through the separate self, the illusion of the separate self, and you unlock the most incredible creativity. That's the after effects of that realization of seeing the dreamlike nature. And quantum physics is it's pointing at the dreamlike nature, and it itself is an expression of the very dreamlike nature that it is pointing at. And quantum physics, when you realize this, what I'm describing, how we wield this incredible creative power, the act of how we dream up our universe moment by moment, instantaneously gets reflected back in a way that hypnotizes us, because it happens both over time and out of time, in no time. And then we become entranced by the creative geniuses that we are. And then we've forgotten that genius power and we've fallen asleep. What I'm pointing out is that once you see that, particularly then, and then you connect with other people who are seeing it, who are actually awakening to, remembering, to remember, to put together the dismemberment of the shamanic process. That's the death rebirth. When you actually, really are able to do that and connect with other people, then it's what I call, you activate our sacred power of dreaming, the part of us that's dreaming the dream into materialization, dreaming the waking dream. And you discover, just like imagine if you're in a night dream and you actually have lucidity in the night dream and you connect with your other dream characters and they're also awakening to that. We're all dreaming together. We're all aspects of each other. And you contemplate, what are you realizing? You're realizing the dream you're in is an actual function of how you're dreaming it. And you realize, oh my God, we could put our sacred power of dreaming together in a way to change the dream, to actually make a difference. And this is evolutionary. We're actually being invited to consciously step in and to participate in our own evolution. That's what this is all about. If we don't recognize that, guaranteed we're going to be fated and doomed to continue to destroy ourselves. Because quantum physics is a modern day spiritual treasure.
Yep.
And, and it's what it's revealing to us. And it's just one of the modern day spiritual treasures. It's, there are many, many channels, we're all, because I just want to go back one thing to that idea of terma. There's one person who's destined to discover it. Well, what if we as a species are the people who are destined to discover this incredible terma, whether you call it quantum physics or, like I said, it's multi-channeled, and, that it actually, it's the very medicine, because it's clear that if we, if we don't come to terms with what's happening, I mean, like you were saying with the whole conspiracy theories of like, oh, whether it's vaccine or decentralizing power and control or like microchipping or whatever, who knows? I mean, I would say the shadow knows, but who knows what's actually happening? But I want to bring out a new conspiracy theory, and it is that we can conspire to co-inspire each other. That's a conspiracy theory that I'm subscribing to, and and the idea being that there's incredible power when sufficient number of us who've been imagining that we've existed as a separate self. Because I just want to point out Watiko, before I found that name, I was calling it malignant egophrenia, or ME disease, me disease. It's a misidentification of who we think we are. That's the separate self. And because Watiko, what it does, how it operates in our mind, it actually, in the apocryphal text, they talk about a counterfeiting spirit. And a counterfeiting, it's completely word for word Watiko. This counterfeiting spirit impersonates us, and it puts us on, which has a double meaning of putting us on like a suit of clothes, but also to fool us. And so it's like this ape. It apes us. And then by impersonating us in a limited version of who we are, if we don't see its ploy, we then identify with that, step into that, and then unwittingly take a look at what's happened. We've given ourselves away. We've actually, identified with a limited version of who we're not. And so Watiko can't steal our soul. It tricks us into giving it away ourselves. And then we're just in we're in this self-reinforcing feedback loop of the separate self, just endlessly reinforcing itself. And that's the hypnotic spell. And in Buddhism, that's called the grasping and the clinging. That's really what the Buddha discovered. He discovered the source of suffering for our species, and that's it. That clinging and grasping onto a separate self, that becomes self-generating, okay? But the idea being, when you see through that illusion of that separate self, you can activate the genius, the collective genius that is greater than any one of us, has in our minds. And, then all bets are off. Because quantum physics is saying something really interesting. It's saying, first of all, this universe is quantum on every scale, okay? And that we are living quantum entities. And one way of understanding that, what is a quantum entity? Well, quantum physics has shown that before the moment of observing it, before the moment that you actually dream it into existence, that quantum entity exists in every and any potentiality that it ever possibly could. And then the moment you dream it, it actualizes into a particular manifestation. All the potentialities, they just vaporize as if they've never existed. But what that is pointing at, that even if one of those potentialities is, and to quote a quantum physicist, highly ridiculously unlikely, that could be the one that manifests this very moment, okay? You see, because the way Watiko operates and the way the coronavirus operates in the mind is through fear. So if we then think, wow, we're really, things are terrible, and you fall into despair and depression and pessimism, well, by holding that viewpoint, you're going to draw the evidence, because this is a dream, to confirm your viewpoint. So now you actually have the proof that you're just, reacting to what's actually the real world, without realizing, wait a second, by you having that pessimistic attitude, you're actually part of the problem, creating the very darkness you're reacting against. And so the point being that when we see through that, and we activate, our genius power, particularly the collective genius power, our sacred power of dreaming, and you realize that instead of getting fixed in pessimism and despair, like I was saying, even if something's highly ridiculously unlikely, such as our species having a viral global awakening, like I'm an artist, I'm creating a global awakening, an art happening called Global Awakening. And so in a way, this is the true vaccine for the coronavirus. And that is, that we are actually, having a global awakening, and let that meme, let that thought form go viral. And not just the meme, but the realization of what it's pointing at, i.e. that we're dreaming, that we're actually waking up, and the coronavirus is the alarm clock. And if we see it that way, being like a dream, that's the way it will manifest. And yet if we see it in a fearful way, like, oh, Paul is just a new age, magical, woo-woo, crazy thinker, well, then you're going to manifest a world of fear that's going to destroy you.
Brilliant, Paul. I love it, man. I love it. It's great. And our paths have been quite similar, Paul, you know. Well, you went through quite an interesting time, in inverted commas, when you had a breakthrough, not a breakdown, myself included. I've had to go in bins for food. I've been homeless quite a few times in America and Africa. I've had some terrible times, but those were the very, very things which was the smelling salts to bring me back home. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I've got lots of problems. Ask my wife, you know. But, you know, I love what you said, you know, and with the conspiracy thing, you know, make no mistake, everybody, if you don't step in your spiritual power now, and if you don't come home and really use this to change and recover and remember and relocate from your dislocation and your spiritual homelessness, yes, you will be taken advantage of in these times. Yeah. Totally. Just quickly, yeah. I was just saying, they, Paul, will make the most of it. But here's the big but. If we do what Paul just said, if you can co-inspire that power and consciousness, that is untouchable, because then the psychopathic dictators of what's going to come next will wave their sticks, and we won't react, because we'll be in such a state of power enough. Because listen, this is a blessing or a curse, and most of this could be a blessing, because like I said, we needed a death of the old self. It's a Frankenstein's monster that's killing us. It's going forward, smashing up countries, raping the earth, taking us too far away from ourselves instead of towards ourselves. And why I say it's the death of the self, Paul, as you know, is because that death, and people know if they've had cancer or if they've nearly died. I've died before, not only spiritual, physically almost. So I remember when my mother died, suddenly I found her, she was dead. The shock. And sometimes, guys, let me tell you something, we need a shock. We need a shock. And I remember the next day after my mother died, I was very aware, because I'm like yourself, our paths are very similar, Paul. I'm an artist as well, and I use that as therapy and to make points and stuff. And I remember seeing people with a different type of feeling. I saw more loving people the next day when I was walking around. I thought they might have lost someone, they're in pain. I saw the leaves on the trees. I heard a bird go by, and it was like that shock brought me home. And this is what we're seeing. And on a very positive note, let me tell you, everybody, something about this virus. And okay, we could go into the whole thing. It was released in Wuhan purposely or not purposely. Obama sold it to China, or blah, 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 or it was released purposely to do this or do that. Forget about all that just for now. 80%, 88% roughly of the people who are getting this are getting better. Most of the deaths are older people. 4,000 people died in China. Yeah, that's a lot, but it's not. It's in my opinion, it's not a lot enough to lock everything down. But you know what I'm saying, Paul, is that this is, in my opinion, this is the inception of manual override. If you're on an airplane and you're on automatic pilot and it's got a trajectory, a momentum, it keeps going and going and going. The money system keeps going. It's almost like you can't stop it. It's just bowling forward, crushing everything inside, power and greed before human happiness and the well-being of spiritual people. But it needed to crash. And here's a quick thing before I forget. I said this on my last show, Paul. Sometimes when there's a train carriage and you're all crammed in there, it's almost like a prison planet for me now. And yes, we've been complicit in our own blooming slavery. Sometimes it gets so bad and so crazy, it falls and it crashes. And when it crashes, it gives people a chance to escape and create something completely different, another parallel system. And I say to people, Paul, can you imagine a system without money? Can you imagine a system where everyone cares and shares and is loving and kind? Can you imagine a utopia like what's on the front of those Jehovah's Witness magazines, man? It's possible. Believe me, it's possible. And this is a portal of opportunity now. We must step into our shamanic power, become the shamans we are, and we will be amazed, Paul. Amazed. Sorry, I went rolling on there, you know.
Yeah. So is there? Oh, I was waiting for a question. Okay.
Well, no. I just, you know, just saying that, you know, it's the.
No, so can I go? Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you're totally right on. And what, like, for example, the excitement and the energy coming through you right then, and coming through me. What I'm
at last, you know,
is yeah, like there's incredible creative energy that's informing and animating what just came through you and what just came through me. And of course, of course, we're all a work in process. I mean, I certainly am. And the idea being that, to channel that energy, for you to channel it, whether it's with your podcast or writing more books or, and for me to do whatever I'm doing with my interviews or my groups or with my, books or whatever. But the idea being that we all, it's almost like you could think of, there's like two parts of us. There's the one part, I know for me, this speaks to me. I can, see the part of me that can just get, kind of unconsciously absorbed and identified in this limited identity. And at that point, I can easily imagine I'm in the hell realm and I'm just imprisoned. I'm in prison and I don't know how to get out and I feel totally double bound. But then there's another part of me that's this awake part of me. And it's almost like that's when I think of after the crucifixion, Christ went down to the underworld for 3 days, like this would be that part of me, the Christ part of me that is like free of that whole double bind or that prison, and because the idea of Watiko, it actually, it gets consolated through trauma, like we've all been traumatized. But then the trauma ends and we've internalized the trauma and we become our own control system in that, we then the thing, when Watiko is a form of trauma, because think about what trauma is, the act of being traumatized, we then react to try to heal the trauma by creating the very trauma that we're trying to heal from. That's the repetition compulsion. And that's an endlessly self-created feedback loop, but encoded in that is the solution because, my favorite definition of trauma is unexperienced experience. We weren't able to properly experience the trauma at the moment it happened. And so then we become overwhelmed and we split, we dissociate, and that's the trauma. And interestingly, when we split, we develop these complexes and some of them become so independent of consciousness, they become autonomous complexes is the name. And that's what the ancient indigenous people would call demons, because they seem to have this demonic will and independent sort of life and mind of their own that's contrary to us, but it's actually just parts of the wholeness of our psyche that we, due to trauma, have disassociated from. But the idea being is that encoded in that repetition compulsion, we're actually trying to integrate something, to experience something, to discharge that energy that's bound up in that compulsion to recreate, that's keeping us in the seeming prison. And that's what's happening in our world, is that we collectively, we're a species in trauma who are dreaming up this this repetition compulsion. Whatever we're acting out, it's then creating the very problem. So what do? We double down and create it even more, and then we're killing ourselves. And so the coronavirus is I love that, the idea of the smelling salts, waking us up out of that. And then, that's the, and then the idea of we can be even stronger than we were before the trauma. And, but everything depends, being like a dream, quantum physics has proven, this isn't a determinate world. It all depends how we dream it moment by moment. And, so if enough of us, whether you call it the 100th monkey phenomena, or in the Bible, they talk about 144,000, the symbolic number, if there's enough of the yeast in the dough, the bread will leaven. And if enough of us actually wake up, one way to understand this, it's like if you have a glass of water and you dissolve these granules of sugar in the water, they'll just dissolve and dissolve one after the other. But then when it reaches the saturation point, you add one more grain of sugar and a whole crystal will manifest. And that's an example where that, is a symbol of, it could be in this moment, any one of us waking up, seeing the dreamlike nature, seeing Watiko, how, owning our shadow, however you would characterize that moment of expansion of consciousness, could be the very grain of sugar that activates a collective awakening in the entire collective psyche of humanity. And when you realize that that's really possible, just like quantum physics is saying, you don't want to dream just, because quantum physics expands the realm of the impossible to unimaginable degrees. And the fact that that's possible, that you actually having the realization right now that you're dreaming, that you've dreamed me up into your mind right now to say these very words. And who am I but just a dream character, a part of your own mind? That if you have that realization, that, like I'm saying, could be the very, straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, that is that grain of sugar that catalyzes a global awakening. And holding that point of view increases positive energy. And that's what we need. We need to not at all feed the negative energy, because then we're actually colluding with Watiko. Then we're actually complicit in our own victimization, and there is no one else to blame. There's no one doing anything to us. We then are doing that to ourselves. So this is talking about really connecting with our power, with our creative power, with our agency, taking responsibility for who we are, for who we're discovering ourselves to be. And that's what's available to us. I mean, it's just being offered freely to us.
Thanks, Paul. It's often free. It's free, man. Hey, listen, I'll just bloat out a couple of things now what resonate with what Paul's saying here. It's like almost the universe is going, hey, you're not listening. Come. You're not listening. Come here. Let me wake you up a bit. But, just two things I want to just say, Paul, before I ask you something else here. The interesting thing is, because I'm very interested in the shamanic work and journey myself. I've done some work with it. I always make it clear to people, don't put me on a pedestal. There's an old saying, you can be enlightened one day and wake up an asshole the next. So be careful with putting yourself on pedestals, ladies and gentlemen, because I've had a lot of crashes when I thought I was really spiritually awakened, I'll tell you. But anyway, look, this is the interesting thing for me now, Paul. We're all being locked in our houses, or locking ourselves in our houses. It depends which way you look at it, okay? But this is the interesting thing. This is like I get people coming in my shop, Paul, two things. And they say, I'm in despair, I've lost myself, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. And I always say to them, in this system, actually, that's a natural symptom from a healthy body and mind and a healthy spirit that's in a system that's driving it mad. You should feel like that. Don't take antidepressants. Don't drink every day. That is a symptom. That is a wake-up call to a system that's literally pulling you away from yourself. And we're pulling ourselves away from ourselves. I know it's both. But what I'm very interested in now, Paul, and I was just thinking about it when you said it, one of the ladies used to come in, she said, that's how I felt, And I used to say to this lady, well, that's how you should feel. This is what I think we're going through, Paul, now on a shamanic level. This is a vision quest, because I've been on a vision quest. You go there. It's a bit radical. You dig your own grave. Mine was about that high. I even put a headstone on mine. And you dig it. You wee yourself in the night. You come out. You're fasting. You're being still. It's almost a forced coming home, that you go voluntarily, right? So, and it's like the old monks. They used to lock themselves away for a while. They didn't used to eat. And by doing this type of vision quest thing, you're actually coming home to yourself. So in one sense, what we're experiencing is a free vision quest, And I paid a bit of money for mine. So, and I'm not saying that, and I'm making fun of it as well. But listen, this is what it is. It's like, okay, we're locking ourselves away. We're having less food. Some people are terrified and their money's running out. I've just had to close my galley. My money's run out. I need money. Okay. But for me, it's the perfect transition, a death of the old me, really, because I wanted to do more of this work, talking from the heart and from the spirit and working that way more. So I see this as a locking down of humanity to actually fast, to be still, to do the vision quest, to dig a grave, to die to our old selves, and then have a rebirth, which if we navigate that birth properly, will be the greatest awakening in human history, Paul. And I want you to talk a little bit about giving people advice because my God, the time runs out so quick. About helping people just come, Paul. Do you do any things with people where you sit and just sort of,
Yeah, a couple things I could say, and
okay.
then I need to go.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
And one is, so I have a whole community that's formed around my work,
yeah,
and it's based on people having the realization that we're collectively dreaming, and and so that's become virtual now as of last week, which is interesting. But typically, 3 or 4 nights a week, some of my closest friends, I mean, they all come and we, just enter the present moment together and see what we dream up each night and what it's revealing to us. So on the one hand, that's speaking of the power of community. But of course, now we actually can't hang out physically, which is so interesting. But the other thing is, what can we do? I'm fortunate in that, I think we all are in potential. I've been cultivating a spiritual practice for a long time, and where I'm very comfortable just sitting on my pillow with my own mind. And what I've, am cultivating more and more of the ability to do over decades is not become hooked or entranced or identified or reactive to the content of the mind, i.e. the thought forms, but I can just have the recognition they're not bad. I don't have to push them away. I don't have to judge them. I can recognize, the thought forms are just the display of the mind, just like the waves are the display of the ocean. And I can allow the thought forms to arise, but I can allow them to naturally self-liberate back into, in a sense, the emptiness of the mind that, out of which they arose. So, and that's an effortless, natural process. That's just what happens if I stop interfering with my thoughts. And then me doing that more and more actually connects me or helps me to become more familiar with my true nature. And in Buddhism, they'll talk about, or not just Buddhism, Christ himself in the apocryphal text, he literally says, I am a mirror to those that know me. And the idea being that the mirror is a perfect symbol of the self. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, they'll talk about, the mirror, think about it, you're sitting in front of a mirror and the ordinary person sees the reflections in the mirror, whatever the objects in the room are, or themselves too, and they'll identify with that's who so that they're identifying with the reflections, but they forget, in a sense, that our condition is actually to be the mirror. And the mirror is never tainted or stained by any of the reflections, no matter how dark the object is. The mirror is always present, always the same. It's never sullied or made dirty by any of the reflections. And that's in a sense, but we become entranced by the forms of the world, by the content in our mind, by those thought forms, each of which is like a dream. And then we become absorbed in it, whatever, ad infinitum. And what I'm pointing at is that the very thing that's obscuring us, those reflections, those thought forms, because think about it, they're obscuring the silver surface of the mirror, but they're actually revealing the surface of the mirror, which was invisible. We never would have seen it without the reflections. So in the same way, the very thing that's encoded in our mind, that's encoded, that is the display of our mind, the thought forms, which, all creates all the stories and problems and obstacles, that itself is the stimulator or the catalyst for waking up. And you see, so this is the last thought I want to offer, and then I should go, and that is that the thing about the coronavirus and the Watiko mind virus and what I've just been describing about, doing spiritual practice, one thing is in common with all of those, and that is encoded in the darkness is actually the light, that they're all quantum phenomena, our minds, the Watiko virus, who we are, and, with our minds, the Watiko virus, and then the coronavirus, we're all, in a sense, quantum entities. And what I mean by a quantum entity, think about light. What is the nature of light? Well, it will manifest as a wave or a particle depending on how we observe, how it's observed, on how we set up the experiment, the questions we ask, how we interpret the data. That determines the outcome we get. We're influencing the very universe that we then experience as seemingly other than ourselves. And that's the thing, that being a quantum entity, the coronavirus, the Watiko virus, and ourselves, and our genius of our mind, they both contain the opposite superposed together. Like the deepest poison, Watiko contains the deepest poison, for example, that can kill us. And it has not only its own medicine and antidote, but incredible blessing. It's helping us to wake up to who we are. Same thing with coronavirus. Same thing with the mind. We can create the most incredible nightmare, or the mind itself, can recognize its nature and wake up. So that's what I mean, that they're all quantum phenomena, and to not get entranced by the dark, by very convincing sort of, the darkness of the display, but to recognize that itself, when there's great light around, light has no meaning unless it illumines the darkness. And the fact that the darkness in our world is getting illumined is showing that there's this incredible light right here. And instead of focusing on the darkness and reacting to it, if we can just actually recognize that light, that's our nature, that's really, in a sense, the real medicine for what's happening in our world right now.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks so much. I know you got to go. I won't keep you. I'm just going to say a few words when we close, Paul. So before we let Paul go, I'm just going to round it off when Paul's gone. Just to say, Paul, Awakening the Dream and Awakening the Dream community, awakeningthedream.com. Paul, can people support you? If you've got anywhere people can support you? Not that we are like beggars, but I mean, really, your work is phenomenal.
I appreciate that. They can go to Awaken in the Dream, my website, and everything's free. I'm not, I'm terrible at monetizing. That's not at all my priority. I'm just wanting to get this work out. And, so there's a ton of articles and interviews like this, video or audio interviews. But then the way you can support me, there's a way to donate. You can donate, or you can buy my books. I'll autograph them and send them out. That really helps me. Or also, I'm in private practice. So, and it's funny, more and more people are getting in touch with me after this whole crisis has emerged, because I think people are so destabilized. And I don't know, maybe they're familiar with my work and understand I could be maybe, of help in a unique way. So yeah, any of those, but I appreciate it because, certainly this is challenging doing this type of work and making a living and supporting yourself. And, somehow I've been able to do that. I'm certainly not rich, but, I'm just, I'm happy. What I'm doing, this is my role. And what I'm basically reflecting to you is the best any of us could do is to really ascend. When a shaman gets called, what makes them really sick is if they turn down the calling. But if you assent and say, okay, I will agree to the calling that my higher self is urging me to have the courage to step into, then that same energy that sponsored your calling will give you whatever you need to accomplish it, because it's the same source. And so, so if anybody, it'd be great just to support my work, but the way to really support my work is to get it out. That's the deepest support. Yeah.
Thanks,
so
thanks, Paul.
Thank you so much, really.
Thank you so much, Paul. And you're showing people, when you said you're not rich, you're showing people the real, true riches, the riches of the spirit, the riches of the spirit. So I really appreciate you doing that, Paul. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you for being you. And I'm honored to be on the planet at the same time as you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. So bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul. All the best. Bye-bye, Paul. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Well, let's see.
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I try. What do we do here? Yeah. I think it's that. Thanks, Paul. All the very best.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll send you. I want to send you an email. So if you check your emails, I'll send you an email.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
All the best. Bye-bye for now, Paul. There goes Paul. Wow. Gee whiz. Okay, let me just open this up quick just before I say goodbye. I don't know what I've done wrong there, but oh, there we go. It's a bit tricky with this. I've changed my studio, so we're in a different place here. And I just want to round it off by saying thank you so much to Paul Levy. I read Paul's book, Dispelling Watiko. Sting, the singer Sting, was enthusing about that book a long time ago. And why I like Paul is because Paul looks at the whole spectrum. Fantastic work Paul's doing now. And just to round that off and say, it's interesting that we're being split down the middle, aren't we? It's sort of a paranoia forcing us all, away from each other, this coronavirus, which is a fascinating scenario. And at this very same time, it's pulling us back towards each other and pulling us home to ourselves. Yeah, that's what it's doing. It's a vision quest. As I said, it's a vision quest. And there's going to be a lot of people suffering. Don't get me wrong here. And my heart goes out. Don't think I'm taking this lightly. I'm like Paul. I think I must have taken the Bodhisattvic vow. I feel people's pain, and that's horrible. Believe me, it's horrible to feel people's pain, and that's what I'm here doing my work for. Because I'm not going to I could go and live in Greece and pick olives with my family and be swimming on the beach. I can't, because I've got to do this work here. So you can go and find Paul, and Paul will do sessions with you, I believe 1-to-1, I think, as well, which also I'm doing as well now on Skype. If you want to contact me, if you can't afford it, doesn't matter. I'm not here to say I'm this perfect guy. I'm not. But I've been through hell and high water, and I could know what people's pain's like. And I want to leave you with one more analogy before I go. It's my favorite analogy of all time, which is I've said it many times, which is when you have a baby chick pecks its way out of an egg, what actually happens is there's a poison which builds inside the egg, which actually triggers the baby bird to peck. And if it doesn't peck its way out, it's going to die. I believe the coronavirus is, amongst many other things, the poison which is going to awaken humanity very fast. And on a positive note, before I go, as I said, I speak to doctors every day. There's a lot of people dying from this. It's really bad, but probably not to warrant a massive lockdown. And I do believe this lockdown, I'm not saying, look, I won't go into that side of things on this show, but I will just say, if we don't peck our way out of this egg and bring in something new and use it to actually awaken ourselves and also find the strength inside ourselves, it's definitely a finding the strength time now. And that does often come through pain and suffering. I know myself, I've been through hell. I've been homeless. I've been homeless in Florida. I've been homeless in England. I've been homeless in Africa. I've gone in bins. I've gone through terrible drugs. I've gone through terrible alcohol, all sorts of terrible things. But that was the very pain that I had to go through, really, to pull myself back home, you know. And so, yeah, please support my shows as well. You know, I've left the gallery now and I'm doing this full time. So if you can help me, even if, and I hate to be a beggar, but we're all beggars, you know, don't look down at beggars on the street. We're all begging for our crust and to keep paying the bills. So if you can support me, £1 a month, 50 pence a month, just your support spiritually is good enough for me. And what I do is, if you send me an email, I send you a copy of my book in PDF form. But if you can buy it, all the better, from my website, jasonleosatis.com. And you can support me on Patreon as well on there. And it's a delight to be with Paul tonight. Thank you, Paul Levy. Great man, doing great work. I love his work. And as I said, you know, we're all wonderful, great magicians. And we have had amnesia, and we've been keeping this thing going. We're almost complicit in our own slavery and keeping the system going, which is really killing us. So this is the great takeaway for me with this system. As I said with Paul at the very beginning, it's exposing the absurdity of the whole thing. You know, let's print 350, billion out and just start paying people. And no, how about releasing humanity from slavery completely? And that's where we'll release ourselves from our own slavery, by actually coming home to ourselves. And my new shows are going to be about that. I'm going to be recording regularly now and talking about transcending fear, spiritually coming home to ourselves, finding that great peace and power that's within every human being. It's not something we have to try and get. It's something we've already got. It's just covered over with our madness and our rush and everything. So we're coming home at last. It's brutal. It's not comfortable, but often awakenings aren't. And I'll leave it with that. So thanks very much for watching. I've got I think supposed to have Michael Tellinger on the show from the Ubuntu movement. And I'll be doing regular shows myself now. Oh, also, I like Paul. I'm myself an artist. I'm going to be doing some art therapy lessons as well, just sketching and painting, because that's what I am as well, as a painter. You can see some of my work on my website there. So well done for everybody, for your courage. I really mean it. You know, I know a lot of you must be in pain and fear. It's very frightening. Most people can't pay their bills. I'm on that camp now. Honestly, we're all in big trouble, but we're also in a transitional period. Remember, epoche, Greek word for the epoche, stoppage in all pregnancies. That becomes a place where the pregnancy stops. Good job you can't catch it from there. The pregnancy stops and the birth begins. We're in that transition now. And we might have to push a bit, okay? But don't lose yourself through this. It's a time to find ourselves. Don't go away from yourself. I'll be talking about that on the next shows when I'm doing that kind of thing. Use it to come back towards yourself. It's a great opportunity. And I know we can get through this. And I know it's a great time for humanity to transition and change gears into a new type of reality. And before I go, I'll just say this. Often people say, oh, it's an illusion. It's all an illusion. Yes, we're not even solid under a microscope, actually. But so a great wise man said to me, it's not an illusion, Jason. He said, it's a reality that needs drastic healing. So thank you all very much. Bless you. Stay in your power. Stay happy. Love your children. Use this time to be with your family again. You'll start noticing them again, and you'll start noticing yourself again, and you'll start noticing the things that we left behind ourselves because we were going too fast, forced to go too fast, like a sword of Damocles above us. Let's relax back into ourselves now and come home. Thank you very much. God bless you all.